everybody. Welcome to Baphomet's Lounge. I'm your host, the incomparable NSS. Joining me today, as she has been for the last several episodes, is my trusty pitbull sidekick, Aspen. So, Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul's project is planning on reuniting Pantera, and of course, the two aforementioned gentlemen, have since passed away. Dimebag from a horrible assassination shooting on stage. And there's been a little bit of a brouhaha whether they should or shouldn't. And it's a unique thing, this business that we call music. It's a music industry. So I decided to break down bands where members have changed into various groups and my thoughts, etc. So with regards to first group is where the singers essentially only the singers changed, or some members slowly migrated out from time to time, but the big move was the singer. That would be the 10,000 Maniacs, AC/DC, Accept, Anthrax, Bad Company, the Brand New Heavies, In Excess, Iron Maiden, Helloween, Marillion, Motley Crue, Nazareth, Queen, and Van Halen. Now, for example, with AC/DC and In Excess, both of those bands, the lead singers passed. AC/DC actually went on to have a larger career than with the original singer. I mean, I'm a huge Bon Scott fan. I love them. In Excess only, they had substantially a huge career. It was the original members only. And their lead singer passed away. They only put out one album without him. And the way they found it was through one of those, Star Search type of TV shows. I didn't mind Switch, but, essentially it was meh, 10,000 Maniacs, Accept, Anthrax, and Bad Company. Marillion, those guys changed singers. And they actually had a great long career. And I don't mind it that the singers changed, even though the original singers were outstanding. With 10,000 Maniacs, you can't replace Natalie Merchant's voice, but Lady, what's her name, the viola player, and she became the lead singer, is an admirable job, and they've written a lot of great stuff with her. Except, I love the new Accept. There was a quick lineup change, it's always considered Udo, but Udo decided he did not want to continue on with the band anymore. And I love the new Accept. I love that lead singer that they have, and the shit they've been writing has been molten metal. I feel the same with Anthrax. John Bush from, a lot of people bag on the John Bush era, but I loved the John Bush era. Bad Company, they actually approached the 90s with a whole new lead singer and a whole different sound. I really like it. Brand New Heavies are interesting in this group because Brand New Heavies were basically a core band that never really had a lead singer. They switched lead singers from time to time. And they had one that was always with them, or their biggest era, and she came back and then she left. So they were always kind of a unique band in that sense. Iron Maiden, Helloween, both changed lead singers. It changed their sound. They actually changed the band members. And with Iron Maiden, there are people that swear that the Paul Di'Anno era is the greatest era ever. Obviously, the Bruce Dickinson era was a huge era, but and the defining era, I want to forget that the Blaze Bayley era ever existed. But, both of those guys sort of morphed and the singers changed the sound. Marillion and Van Halen, the singers changed, the band went into a different direction. You either like them or don't like them. I actually enjoy the Van Hagar era, much to maybe the chagrin of some of the people that are diehards. There's, in the case of Marillion, the Fish era was actually, it's kind of like the AC/DC era where the new singer is got a larger lion's share of what was the band. Motley Crue only did that experiment once with John Corabi. I think that's the greatest Motley Crue album ever. No, I will say Shout at the Devil's the definitive Motley Crue album, and that's the second greatest. That was the only time I ever saw Motley Crue live, and I've been a John Corabi fan for life. Queen's an interesting thing. Queen did something that I really liked, and I should have maybe moved them to another group. You know what? I am going to move Queen down. Well, no. Freddie Mercury passed away. Queen disappeared for a bit, and then they got up with Bad Company's original singer, whose name escapes me. He was the original Paul original singer from Free. I can't think of his name. And I love what they did. They released one album, This Cosmos Rocks, and they released a live album, live in the Ukraine. And it was, it was different. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see how that would work. And it worked out great. And I love when bands do that, when they change the singer and change their sound. And then they got this Adam Lambert kid who was with, one of the Rock Hunt's, TV model search, star search things. And the kid's an outstanding singer. I will not take one iota away from the kid as a singer. But he's kind of like Freddie Mercury Mark II. They're just trying to continue the legacy. Rather than make something new, they're just trying to keep things moving with that. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Nazareth is a unique situation where the new singer, Carl Settons, replacing Danny McCafferty. Danny McCafferty had COPD and just could not sing anymore live. He would pass out on stage. They have kept things going. And, I do enjoy Carl Settons, and they've put out a couple albums with him. It's a different band. It's like Van Halen. I think that it was more out of necessity. They had an interim singer in between. The guy was terrible. He left, and then Carl Settons joined. Again, it was kind of a necessity thing to keep the project moving. Now, slowly, members had been rotating out of Nazareth, so they are a different band, and different writing styles have happened to them. So it is slowly morphed. Here's a band where everyone but the singer has disappeared. It's a group band, so we'll go Def Leppard, Depeche Mode, Duran Duran, The Eagles, Eloy, Jethro Tull, Kraftwerk, Metallica, Motorhead, The Pretenders, Public Enemy, Saxon, Scorpions, Steppenwolf, The Tubes, Wasp, and The Who. So all those bands have changed lineups throughout their time, but the singer never changed. Def Leppard, people can argue that Pyromania is their last good album. And, Steve Clark died. People think that the band sucks after Pete Willis left. They have remained consistent, but members changed. Depeche, and maybe the sound might have morphed. Depeche Mode had certain members in the beginning, and then other members, and it was semi-consistent, but there are eras. Duran Duran was another band that had just major eras as original members had left and came back, but they never changed out their singer. The Eagles is the same thing. They always had a rotating sort of group. You had your trifecta, or maybe your duo. You had the essential two lead singers, and then other guys morphed in and out. Eloy really has one guy, the main lead singer. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he is essentially Eloy. Members rotate in and out. And it's the same with Jethro Tull. Ian Anderson is Jethro Tull. I know Martin Barr has been the longest serving member, and I'm a little pissed off at the way Ian basically decided to go solo, write his best material. It was around when Ian originally had gone solo. He had written, Made in England, and then Divinity's 12 Dances with Gods, which were solo albums. It was Jethro Tull's lead singer doing solo stuff that was not going to work with Jethro Tull, period. And then all of a sudden he released, they'd done Roots to Branches, and he released a song, Secret Language of Birds. And I said, this is a Jethro Tull album. And then they released jtull.com, which I thought sucked moose dung. And then Ian kept releasing solo albums. albums. And he did like Thick as a Brick Part 2, Rupee's Dance, all these albums that were essentially Jethro Tull albums. And now he's come back with that band after like 5 solo albums that are Jethro Tull albums. He's come back and released a Jethro Tull album with his solo band. So I don't know what sort of arrangement that he worked out with Martin Barr, but I'm kind of a little bit bummed because I don't think that was right, but this is the business called music. But I won't see Jethro Tull as a result because of that, and they're one of my top 10 favorite bands of all time. Metallica really only ever changed out bass players. Motorhead, it's Lemmy, and whoever else rotated in and out of it, but it was always Lemmy. It's the same you could say with the Pretenders. Scorpions, it was essentially Klaus and Schenker, Rudy, and then whoever rotated in and out of them. One could say the same with Public Enemy and The Who, and the Tubes, which is essentially, Fee and a couple of guys, and then other people rotated in and out. Steppenwolf is John Kay. That band morphed, people coming in and out, and then in the late 70s when it allegedly broke up, then there were all these weirdo bands that were forming with like 1 or 2 members differently until John Kay went to court and he changed it to John Kay and Steppenwolf, and it's essentially John Kay who is Steppenwolf, and I'm a big fan. And The Who, was really the 3 guys when Keith Moon died, but then Entwistle died, and it is the 2 guys. But members change. That band really wasn't affected by members change because it really is Pete Townshend's writing that is still the core of that band. Interesting, we'll go with an interesting group, and I'll say with Alice Cooper and Pink Floyd. Alice Cooper, the band was Alice Cooper. And that band, for the first 5 or 6 albums, up until like the one, I think it was Muscle of Love, after $1 Billion Babies, was the band. Around that time, of course, drugs and alcohol and all played a huge role, and egos and attitudes and what have you. Alice Cooper, the guy who was really Vincent Furnier, actually changed his name to Alice Cooper. Welcome to My Nightmare was his solo album. So it kept the name, but it was not the band. Okay, and there was an actual morph and change in that band's sound. So from like 77 on ish, it was a new band. It wasn't the band. The band disappeared. The singer changed his name to the band name. I think he pays them a royalty for it, but the whole project actually changed. So that was an interesting thing. Pink Floyd did the same. There are 4 members in Floyd. After the final cut, Roger Waters leaves. He goes solo. David Gilmour goes solo. Everyone sort of did solo stuff. Rick Wright actually left the band after The Wall, so he was never on the final cut. Then Gilmour and Mason release Momentary Lapse of Reason. And then a lawsuit ensued, and then they released a Division Bell, and actually they released after Rick Wright died. Rick was then made back to being a full member, and then they released one last one, something The River. It was just after he died, they just scraped the bottom of the barrel and grabbed whatever recordings they'd made with him, and then they released it accordingly. That's a weird, unique situation. I'll never see it. I saw Floyd as a Division Bell. I saw Waters solo back in the 90s. I never bothered seeing them again. And I think I talked to him about a Pink Floyd thing that I've done. Let's talk Megamorphed. And that would be Asia, Black Sabbath, Blue Oyster Cult, Deep Purple, the Doobie Brothers, Fairport Convention, Fleetwood Mac, Foghat, The Gathering, Genesis, The Guess Who, Judas Priest, Little Feat, Metal Church, Spirit, Styx, Uriah Heep, and Wishbone Ash. These bands morphed to at one point where they weren't even a semblance of what they originally were. In all of these cases, I actually enjoy what happened. Okay. With Asia, it was really Jeff Downs' solo project. And then you had your 4 members, which was a super group. And after album 3, I think Astra, Steve Howard left, Mandy Meyer, who played with Crocus and what have you, joined in. And then after a while, then it became Jeff Downs on keyboards and whoever he picked up. And then for the longest while, John Payne was with him. So somehow John Payne got a piece of the pie. I actually don't mind the John Payne stuff. It's different, but I don't mind it. It's a little different. And then the original Asia came back together. And through whatever legal agreement, we had the original Asia, and then we had Asia featuring John Payne. So you have 2 different touring entities. And Foghat kind of did the same thing. There was a Foghat for the longest time. Now, since most of the members are dead, the only Foghat is with Roger, the drummer, is the only guy who's the original member of the band. And an interesting bit of trivia, the guitar player singer in the band now was the guy from Wild Cherry who actually played that funky music. So that's kind of a unique supergroup. But that band is only the one guy. Blue Oyster Cult changed. It's essentially 2 Oyster Cult. It's basically the Buck and Bloom show. It was Alan Lanier was with them throughout the 90s. It was 3OC at that point. The Bouchard brothers had long left. And now, they have a couple of new guys, and Richie Castellano is really becoming a huge, huge influence on that band. And on the last album, The Symbol Remains, which is great, he's actually written a lot and sang a couple of the songs. So that band has morphed through time as members changed. Blue Oyster Cult, or Black Sabbath, Dio came, rejuvenated it. Ian Gillan came. It's my favorite album, Born Again. I love that album. And then through the 90s, it was whoever showed up to sing. And then they came back as Black Sabbath with Ozzy, which I think is, rubbish stuff. And then they weren't allowed, when Dio came back, they formed with Dio. And then they weren't allowed to be called Black Sabbath. They were known as Heaven and Hell, which as far as I'm concerned, it's Black Sabbath. And then Dio passed away. And it is what it is. Deep Purple is another band that, slowly morphed members through time. Singers changed, members changed. You have Deep Purple Mark I, which is your Hush. And that era, that was 3 albums. Then you had Deep Purple Mark II, which is the quintessential Deep Purple. Then there's Mark III, Mark IV, Mark V, the David Coverdale era, et cetera, et cetera. They are a band that morphed all the time. The Doobie Brothers and Fairport Convention and Fleetwood Mac join into that. Fleetwood Mac, if you listen to the first 3 albums, that is straight blues. You're thinking you're listening to a Memphis blues album. And then there's a huge era that before Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks joined. That's really cool. That is the era Danny Kerwin, and what's his name? He committed suicide. British or American singer. He formed a band called Paris after that. I can't think of his name. Bob Welch, great guitar player and singer. I'd highly recommend you check that band out. I would say Little Feat falls into that. Metal Church falls into that. Spirit falls into that. Styx falls into that. Uriah Heep and Wishbone Ash, where they just keep morphing and changing, with one original member or 2 original members that are left in the program. But the band's morphed. And I like it. At least they changed and they grew, and I'm okay with any of that stuff. I enjoy it. I enjoy what I see with that stuff. Couple interesting exceptions here is, I know you think I'm like doing coke or something because I keep pulling my nose, but I've got a booger right at the edge and it's driving me up a wall. So I gotta pull my nose hair out because it's driving me up a wall. For your edification, I'm just an alcoholic. I've never done drugs in my life. If you want to do them, knock yourself out. Couple of exceptions, the Dead Daisies, which I think essentially is from day one a project group. There's the David Lowery is kind of the managing director of the band. He is from a wealthy family capital management group. And so it's like kind of like his band, and he assembles players. So you had John Corabi was in for a while. Now Glenn Hughes is the lead singer, you know. So that band kind of morphs, you know, and it's always been part of the morphing thing. Grateful Dead is unique in the sense that lead keyboard players died, and then it always stayed the same except for the keyboard players who died and changed, and then they would add other people in and out. And of course, after Jerry died, the band died. Now there's other incantations that became the other ones or what have you, but basically they said that, you know, after Jerry died, the band died, and the only things that changed on them were the keyboard players. Hawkwind is unique because I would say Hawkwind, King Crimson, and Tangerine Dream are bands where you had one person, not the lead singer, but was the definitive member of the band. Okay, so Hawkwind was David Brock. Brock. Yeah, David, is it Brock? Or am I confusing him with Guar? He's dead. Brocky. I think it was David Brock. With Tangerine Dream, you had what is his name? I can't think of his name. And then with King Crimson, it's the incomparable Robert Fripp. And those guys were continuous members of the band. And as long as they were in the band, it was the band. But the band's sound changed, but it was always them, you know? And with regards to Tangerine Dream, they're still playing stuff. Since the passing of founding member, whose name escapes me and drives me up a wall that I can't think of it, but they were going back to his original files, and that's how they were finding what was done or not being done. And so they went, they're still releasing stuff, even though he's dead. They're going back to his original scribblings that he is like Cubase files and notes and scraps. So they're actually taking his original material and releasing it posthumously, adjusting it. So I'm still on the fence whether I like it. Jeremy Fröge is his name, and I can't think. Jeremy was his son. Jerome Fröge he is essentially Tangerine Dream, and they're releasing posthumously stuff, but he's not playing on it. They're grabbing his ideas and releasing them as a new band. Interesting thing with Thin Lizzy, after he died, Phil Lynott, they toured without him, and put out stuff. But a band came out called the Black Star Riders. And what they decided to do is a couple of the original members of Thin Lizzy and a lead singer that sounds just like Phil Lynott. But they said, listen, these are songs we would have written if we were Thin Lizzy. Edgar Fröge was Tangerine Dream, the guy. We would have written had it been Thin Lizzy. But because Phil Lynott is dead, and he essentially is Thin Lizzy, we're going to create a whole new band and write this material and release it onto this material. And I think that's cool as fucking hell and respectful as fucking hell. And they could have sort of taken the name and the brand, but no, they decided to move forward without, sort of, I would say, taking advantage of the situation. So I really, really, really appreciate that. I really do. Which brings me to my final statement, which is issues. Issues for me. So, Blackfoot. Blackfoot always morphed. For the longest time, it was Richie Medlock. And there was the 4 key guys. And then they, in the 80s, they brought in Uriah Heep's keyboard player, who just recently passed away. I can't think of his name. And he played on 2 albums. And then they actually fired the original guitar player, Charlie Haggard, and Ken Hensley had joined keyboard player. And then they fired the entire band, and they released an album called Rick Medlock and Blackfoot with a couple guys from the band Mother's Finest. And I really liked that album. But then it was Rick Medlock and whoever could show up, play with him. Then Rick went and joined Leonard Skinner because there was money in them, there was gold in them hills, and he was playing clubs. Over the last couple of years, he basically a couple of the original members continued on as Blackfoot touring, and Charlie Haggard and bass player Greg, whose name just escapes me because Jackson Spire's original drummer passed away. And they toured and they released a live album. They toured with a group of it was more like a superstar band. Johnny Johnson was lead singer, a guy from the band, I think it was called Axe, played with them. And then Ricky went and bought the rights to the name, and he put out his own group of Blackfoot. And they released one album, Southern Native, and I really liked it because I liked the kid that was singing. They were younger kids, and they brought a different vibe to it, so I liked that album. Then he's fired that whole lineup and come with a group that, in my opinion, kind of sounds like the original Blackfoot, a pseudo cabaret act. Again, I like it when bands change, but you know what? It's the business called music, and they want brand awareness, so they're going to maintain the brand awareness. I'm on the shelf whether I decide to see them or buy any more material by them. I feel the same for Journey, Leonard Skinner, The Outlaws, Quiet Riot. Those guys, I mean, with Journey, they had different singers, and I liked that Steve Auger, I believe, and then they had the guy who sang off the first two Yngwie albums. Oh, I loved him as a singer, but he sounded nothing like Steve Perry, and they let him go. And they find this guy Arnel. He was in a Journey tribute. He was a Filipino guy. Sounds 95% like Steve Perry, and I don't like it. I want to see a band morph. So as a result, I really would never have anything to do with Journey because of that. Even though they morphed, the original Journey was different singers. The original Greg Roll was the original singer. He's the guy that sang Black Magic Woman. They were a Santana offshoot. Their first couple albums were wild, man, some jazz fusion type of exploration. And then they started writing roller skating rink music, made them a fuck ton of money, got them a ton of pussy. And that's cool. And they do what they did, but now they're trying to capitalize on that. And that's why I'm not really interested. Foreigner has no original members. They're kind of a cabaret act. Same with Leonard Skinner. There's one guy left. He's clinging on for dear life, Gary Rosington. They did bring in Huey Thomason from the Outlaws and Ricky Medlock from Blackfoot. But they're kind of a shell of themselves. They keep putting out material. They keep touring. People want to see it. I'll have no part of it. I understand. And it's the same with the Outlaws. The Outlaws was basically Huey Tomlinson stuff. I used to see the band all the time. Huey passed away. Henry Paul came back with the project and with Huey, and he then licensed the band name, and a legal thing ensued. And now it's basically the Henry Paul Project, solo stuff. I saw them. I enjoyed it. I do have the Henry Paul albums that they released, but I wasn't interested at all I apologize. I do have the Henry Paul stuff. It's not bad. I don't know whether I'll go see him again or not, but I feel Huey had the better vibe of the band. He was the only guy that stayed consistently with him. So, Molly Hatchet's unique because Bobby Ingram in the 90s, who was basically the best friend of the lead singer, who was the first to die, Danny Joe Brown. When Danny Joe Brown left in the 80s, he formed the Danny Joe Brown Band, and then Bobby Ingram came with them. They only put out one album, and then Danny Joe Brown went back with Molly Hatchet because neither band was doing well. So they come back, and then they just basically tour endlessly. Bobby Ingram joins in the 90s, and then he buys the rights to the name. He keeps one or two original members, but essentially it's Molly Hatchet in name only. That is a cabaret act that keeps putting out product. Um, I've got people that swear by them. I'm not as impressed. And I decided that I'm not going to support the project with my time or my money. You can. I did a whole episode on Molly Hatchet in the past explaining it, but that is a project that I feel, I don't know if there's really any original integrity in that, or it's really kind of like a brand thing only. The same with Quiet Riot. Essentially Quiet Riot morphed, but Kevin Dubrow was Quiet Riot. And after he passed, people are sort of trying to make money off the name, keep the brand going. Yeah, if you enjoy it, go see it. I'm not going to say no. I'm just not going to give my time or my money for any of the albums they released after that. Kiss is interesting because Kiss's lineup morphed through time, but after the big reunion thing, Kiss just jumped on the idea of let's replace the original members with, keep the makeup, but it's new members. They own the rights to do it. They put out a couple albums as it. I do actually have those albums. And nothing against Eric Singer or Tommy Thayer. Those guys are stellar players. But I really think that they should have either given new makeup or just taken the makeup off. I'm not giving Kiss my money. I'm not interested in that. It's become a cabaret act. And Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley have both hinted that they are replaceable as well. Of course they're replaceable. But basically they want to license their entities out. And then because Kiss becomes a full animatronic. It might as well become a Disney animatronic, you know. If you want to go see it, go see it. I won't. The final band in this one is a unique thing is Yes. Yes's lineup changes constantly. And, different members came in and out. And in all cases, it morphed wonderfully. And in the 80s, John Anderson leaves, and they merge with the Buggles. And the album Drama is my all-time favorite album. It's a different lineup, different singer, but I love it. John Anderson comes back. They put out, 90125, Trevor Rabin era. It becomes a slick pop era. I love it. Again, morphs differently. The band keeps morphing, keeps just doing really cool stuff. Then John Anderson has some vocal problems or something, leaves. They get a guy in the 2000s called Benoit David. Different singer. I really like his voice. I really like what they did, and the band changes, and I think it's really cool. Really cool. But David Benoit has some problems. They kind of fire him. I really love that album, Fly From Here. I love that live album, Live in Lyon. They do some different stuff. And they find this guy, John Davidson, who's, in my opinion, a B-grade John Anderson decoy. They go with the branding. Chris Squire dies. I got Heaven and Earth, they've released a new album since that I'm not even interested in. Okay. And I thought Heaven and Earth was awful. After Chris Squire dying, as far as I'm concerned, the band is done. They keep milking because they can, and I'll just have no part of it, period. End of discussion. I'm done. I love everything John Anderson does. There was an offshoot called Anderson Wakeman Rabin. I saw them live. I got the live album. Then it became Yes featuring Anderson Rabin Wakeman through legal channels. They were supposed to write new material. They never wrote any new material because it didn't happen. And I would have supported that, just like I supported Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe. Okay. The band that is known as Yes, in my opinion, is a cabaret act. I won't bother wasting my time seeing them. So it is what it is. But if you find joy in it, you go enjoy it. So ultimately, if I were to summarize this big, long discussion, I am not interested in cabaret acts. I'm not interested in seeing bands where they have one member in, but they're trying to sound exactly like they sounded in their heyday. I love it when bands change, when bands morph, when bands grow. That's my favorite stuff. Music is meant to grow and morph, but unfortunately, the commercialism forces bands to have to change or go back to their brand, and it bothers me. But hey, they need to make a living just like I need to make a living. So that's why they do what they do. And I got to piss like a racehorse. So I'm going to wrap this up really quick and say, hey, listen, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe and comment, blah, blah, blah. And if you want, grab yourself with links that are down below. Grab yourself a Baphomet Lounge pint glass, Baphomet Lounge koozie, Baphomet Lounge coasters, and you can get all that stuff by going to thebaphometlounge.com or going to the links below to the Baphomet Lounge online store, hosted and supported and maintained by my good friends at Chautauqua Audio Works. So, my dearest friends, until the next time, thank you so very much for your support and for taking the time out of your busy schedule to watch. I greatly appreciate you. Peace. Man, I gotta piss.